Welcome to Diplomacy in Mongolia, where we'll explore the dynamics of Mongolia's diplomatic engagements with its neighboring and partner countries. We'll delve into the relationships that define the nation's foreign affairs, providing a balanced and straightforward perspective on interactions between Mongolia and its neighbors. Today's episode highlights the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the Federal Republic of Germany and Mongolia. Join us as we shine a spotlight on the recent visits, cooperation, and shared interests that define interactions between our two nations. Helmut Rudolf Kulitz, the current ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Mongolia, brings to his role a wealth of experience gained over 3 decades in the German Federal Foreign Office. His robust educational background includes degrees in Southeast Asian Studies, American Studies, and Contemporary History. Ambassador Kulitz has held notable positions throughout his career, such as Ambassador to Chad and head of the European Union delegation in several African nations, accumulating extensive experience in international diplomacy. He has also played significant roles within the German Federal Foreign Office, including serving as the head of the German embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. Today, in our interview, we have invited Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Germany to Mongolia, Mr. Helmut Kulitz. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Pleasure talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Well, this year marks the 50th anniversary between Mongolia and Federal Republic of Germany establishing diplomatic relations. And within this frame, at the beginning of this year, there were significant visits from the German side. And can you share with us what were the major outcomes from the visit of German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier?
With pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and all my best greetings to your audience. Yes, our federal president, Mr. Steinmeier, visited Mongolia, not for the first time, by the way, but for the first time in his capacity as president. He had visited the country 10 years ago when he was foreign minister of Germany and now came back as president. So it was like coming back amongst friends. And as a matter of fact, to put it in a historical perspective, this was in fact the 4th visit of a German president to Mongolia since 1990. We had previous visits in the 1990s, and then in 2008, and yet another one in 2015, and then at the beginning of 2024. So that goes to show that we have a sequence, we have a history of these visits, and of course these visits signify something. Visits are an expression of friendship and of proximity and of a desire to work together. And that's exactly what our intention was with that visit. It was not just the anniversary. Of course, anniversaries, and yes, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of establishing diplomatic relations between former West Germany and Mongolia. But that was just the reason actually to choose the date. The actual reason, the real reason, is a deep closeness between our peoples. That has a long history. We may want to go into that a little bit. It started about 100 years ago with that famous first wave of Mongolian students sent abroad to study and to learn. And a significant number came to Germany. So that's when things started. And then during the Soviet period, when East Germany was part of the communist bloc, there was a good cooperation. I think it was a very close and fruitful cooperation, actually. That came to an end when the Berlin Wall came down and Germany was reunified. But it was not an end, it was just a new beginning. And modern united Germany and Mongolia embarked together on a long course of intense cooperation in many fields. And I think we will come back to that maybe later. And the visit of my president epitomizes that long and extremely friendly cooperation between our countries. So it was a very emotional visit, and I say with pleasure that the Mongolian side, our Mongolian hosts, really pulled all the stops to make it a spectacular visit in conditions that were not easy. We were in the midst of winter in early February. That's a lot more complicated than doing this in summertime, but it was done in a splendid fashion, and I can assure you that when everyone embarked on the plane for the travel back to Germany, there was a lot of enthusiasm and happiness on board.
Mm-hmm. I think the main outcome of the President Walter Steinmeier's visit was the declaration of the strategic partnership between our two countries. And can you share with our viewers what sectors, what industries, what key areas were highlighted during this strategic partnership declaration?
Yeah. Well, it's true. The two sides decided to elevate the level of our diplomatic relations to the level of strategic partnership, which is in the Mongolian taxonomy the highest level for any country which is not a direct neighbor. And that's, of course, a huge honor and a pleasure for us. The declaration that came with it is rather comprehensive. It touches on almost every aspect of bilateral intergovernmental relations, from politics to business to culture to science, all these things. But yes, there is a special focus on some areas, which is cooperation in the energy sector, in the raw materials sector, and maybe also in the defense sector. I would like to highlight these. I should mention all the other sectors. They are all there, but we have had a long-standing partnership in basically all areas. The three sectors that I just mentioned, raw materials, energy, and defense, are the ones that we will continue to put particular emphasis on.
Mm-hmm. You have just mentioned the defense sector. What particular works and projects will be implemented in this sector? For example, we know that both Mongolia and Germany are taking part at the UN peacekeeping operations.
Yeah. Well, once again, a look back into the past helps to understand the future a little bit. Because we have had military cooperation for years, many, many years. And again, I use the word very fruitful relations to illustrate the case. It was Mongolian armed forces that provided force protection when German armed forces were in Afghanistan. Over 12 years in the north of Afghanistan, in a camp called Camp Marmal, which was run by the Germans but protected by Mongolians. So while our infantry went into the field to secure that northern part of Afghanistan, from 2009 till 2021, we're talking about 12 years, their Mongolian comrades stayed inside the camp to provide force protection. So that was a wonderful cooperation, and one that has left very deep and very positive memories with both sides, so that at an early stage it was decided to keep going on that basis. You mentioned joint training in peacekeeping operations. Mongolia is one of the states that, in proportion to its population, provides the highest number of soldiers to the United Nations for peacekeeping. That is something that is honored all over the world. It's a formidable commitment by the Mongolian armed forces and the Mongolian government, something that I think Mongolia should be proud of. And Germany is, of course, also deeply involved in peacekeeping operations in Afghanistan, in Mali before that mission had to shut down, on the Balkans, and a number of other theaters. And to continue training together, adapted to modern needs, to up-to-date needs, etc., is something that we have agreed. It's an ongoing thing. There will be a joint exercise sometime soon in the summer, this coming summer, here in Mongolia. So it's something that we have done for some time. We will keep doing it. We will maybe expand it. There are other areas that I would like to mention that's separate from the peacekeeping. It's a joint training for mountain soldiers. A unit that has not existed in the Mongolian armed forces before. It's a new unit. They're part of the special forces. We have had these forces for a long time. Germany also has quite a number of mountains, so we need these units. And that was started here, actually, as a joint initiative about 5 years ago. We are now in the 6th year. It will be wrapped up by the end of this year. I had the pleasure to witness the training. I went to a joint exercise last week and saw the enthusiasm of Mongolian soldiers. It was wonderful to see that, the enthusiasm to work with their German colleagues and go into the field and train all these things that you need in rough mountain terrain. So we're really talking about going into the Altai Mountains and really difficult, challenging tasks that require a high level of skills as a soldier, but also as a mountaineer. And that was one of the latest activities that we've done together. As I said, it will be wrapped up by the end of the year, but without disclosing too much, I'm quite confident that there will be some sort of follow-up.
You have just mentioned the economy sector, notably energy and raw materials, and what kind of perspectives or opportunities the newly established strategic partnership opens for German businesses and also for Mongolian businesses?
Well, again, our business relations have grown over not only years, but decades now. And we are amongst the trade partners. We are not in the top position. That would be too ambitious, because obviously with the distance to Europe, the additional cost of transport, etc., it would be odd almost if we had a top position. But we are quite happy that trade is going well. The tendency is positive in spite of impediments like the transport route, which has become even more complicated due to the sanctions imposed on the Russian Federation as a consequence of the Ukraine war. Looking at that, and with the necessary realism that you need, I think we're doing quite well in the trade area. It can be improved, it can always be improved, and both sides are working on that. As you know, business is basically a private sector initiative, so we do not order anyone, or we cannot even tell anyone to do such or such a thing. But we encourage, we try to create a favorable framework. We work with our Mongolian partners, state partners, when we think the business climate can still be improved in some areas. That is something that governments can discuss. Eventually, it's up to the enterprises, the businesses themselves to choose their partners, find their partners, come up with something that works, and then do it. But again, as I said, our function is to lay the groundwork through legal agreements when it comes to taxation, investment guarantees, all these things. This is the intergovernmental side. And then based on that foundation, our companies, they scan, they screen the business environment, and if they find the business environment healthy and positive and inviting, they come. They find their partners and they come. So I talked briefly about trade. I should maybe say a word about investment. I think there is still a lot of untapped potential. We do have investments here in the country, and they're not small investments. I think there's room for a lot more still. And again, as I said before, investors are very cautious where to put their money. And if and when the conditions are right, they will come automatically, because the prize to be won here is, of course, access to the raw materials extraction, which has begun in some areas, which is still to come in other areas. When we talk about rare earths, this is for the future. But the potential is clearly there. There's no doubt about it. It's more like now about the technicalities of extraction, which is a very complicated process, but it's on the way. So we hope that, especially that raw materials and energy sector will absorb more investment, more investors. We have a raw minerals partnership concluded in 2011, signed at the time by former Chancellor Mrs. Merkel when she was visiting Mongolia in 2011. And we saw some very good results, but there's still room for improvement and room for expansion, especially of that raw materials partnership. I shouldn't exclude any other. I mean, there are many others. You're sometimes well advised to look in places where others do not look, because it's easily overlooked. There's always a risk of focusing too much on one predominant area, but there's much more. Personally, we think that, or I see that tourism, now heavily promoted by the Mongolian Tourism Association, agriculture, and I mean farming as opposed to herding, these two sectors, other sectors, have a lot of food processing, have a lot of potential still. The Mongolian market is not huge, but it's developing rapidly and very dynamically. And that's, of course, exactly what investors and traders seek.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about the relations between two countries, we cannot omit like cultural and human-related side. And let's talk about what kind of works are being implemented in education sector. As we know, like Germany was one of the popular destinations among Mongolian students since long ago. So what kind of works are being done in this sector?
Well, let me begin by saying that this historical precedent 100 years ago was almost replicated last year when 39 bright, very talented young undergrad students were sent to Germany with grants given by the president himself on behalf of the Mongolian state, which allows them to first study the German language and then, building on that, study whatever they are
interested in.
Therefore,
yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This started last fall. I don't recall the exact date. I think it was in October, November maybe. And the students left, arrived, are now in their initial stage of language training. And so this is a wonderful thing, of course, which recalls that historical precedent led by Mr. Natzig-Dorsch 100 years ago. But since you were asking about what is happening here and how Germany is working with Mongolian partners here, let me just run through the list. It's a long list. It's got many components. Since we talked about raw materials, you may be aware with the German Mongolian Institute of Technology in Nalaich.
GMIT, yeah.
Yes, GMIT. Which celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, and which has released about a year ago the first class of bachelors, and they started into the master's, into the graduate level education. So now they are a fully fledged higher learning institute. Specializing in that particular field, dividing their labor with the Mongolian University of Science and Technology, which is more doing the extraction of raw materials, whereas GMIT is more focusing on processing, adding to the value chain, refining to the next level of up the value chain. So this is probably the flagship of our education cooperation. It's the most visible. We have students there. We have a very active student exchange between German universities and GMIT. We have a faculty exchange from both sides. That is going extremely well. But next to that, we have a whole number of other activities that range from technical and vocational education and training. So to go further, what else are we doing in the field of education? We have GIZ here. GIZ is the implementing agency that cooperates with local partners in moving ahead in any area where the host state thinks things should be improved and where the host state thinks we can benefit mutually from cooperating. GIZ is doing that on behalf of the German government. Last September, we agreed on a new 2-year program that identifies which areas we will cooperate in, and education was one of them. So GIZ is doing that on various levels in technical and vocational education and training. How to do it. They're not doing the training themselves, but they train the trainers. They work with Mongolian partners. How do you set up that system? You need the private sector, schools, the public sector, schools, but also the private sector for complementing that education. The result is ideally graduates who know both the practical side and the academic side of a trade. That's the idea. That's what we have done in Germany for many, 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 many years. It's probably part of our strength as an industrialized nation to have very, very well-schooled young people who go into well-paid and well-looked at professions in companies in technical trades. So I could go on and on and on. There's a lot more. We have management training. That's a very interesting program. It targets top management personnel. It's not training in the sense that they write exams and these things. It's training on to improve certain skills even when you have attained a very high level of proficiency. That goes for, again, the private sector and the public sector. We were proud to have many participants from the Mongolian state structure who came to Germany, participated in the program along with their peers, and hopefully came back with many new ideas, fresh inspirations from others. So that is yet another example of what we're doing. It's a very broad field. It's a very broad field. I could also mention the 14 schools that teach German in Mongolia and that we support. Of course, we have staff on the ground that do those things. And of course, the idea is not just to teach German, but through German, achieve something for the future in our mutual bilateral partnership.
And there are also like non-governmental organizations like Konrad Adenauer and Hans Seidel that operate in Mongolia from German side.
Yes, they came shortly after the beginning of the reforms in 1990, 91. They established their offices here. They celebrated their 30th anniversary last year, most of them. And their field of activity is cooperating in the political developments of the country in terms of nurturing democracy, nurturing a vibrant civil society, nurturing good relations between civil society and the state, nurturing a political culture, if you want. Democracy is something that must be practiced and honed. It doesn't just happen by itself. It's a complicated process. And getting the actors that form democracy, and that includes obviously civil society, to agree to certain standards, certain ways of interaction. That's a necessary part for democracy to flourish. And our political foundations are doing exactly that. They are also available for any council, if that is what our Mongolian partners want. Basically, we try to respond to what our Mongolian friends are inviting us to provide. Because it's something that we want to satisfy a demand that is there. And to give you an example, when legislators from parliament approach our foundations saying, look, we are thinking about a new law on substance X. can you provide us your examples? Can you tell us how you've done it so we can look into that? And then that's the beginning of a discussion. And at the end, the Mongolian side picks and chooses whatever it thinks is useful.
It's like exchange practices between two countries.
Yes, exactly. We're not saying we are any role model in any way, not at all. Every country has its own course and its own destiny, its own history, etc., etc. We only provide a comparative model, and if our Mongolian friends believe this is maybe useful, this is applicable for the Mongolian context, we are happy to provide that to them.
Continuing our interview about the diplomatic relations anniversary, what kind of activities are planned throughout the year?
Not sure if I can give that all away, but no, more seriously, we are planning basically one central event in the fall after the summer break, after the elections. So that will be one highlight which will top our celebrations and maybe conclude them as well. But we are also hoping we can organize a series of events throughout the year on a maybe less visible level, but scattered in the capital, hopefully in the countryside if we can. It's a challenge, but obviously we do not want to restrict our footprint to the capital. So if things work the way we would like to see it, then there will be a series of events scattered. They can be cultural, but they can also be semi-political, like in the universities with political scientists, discussion on whatever. And so that's the idea, that's the concept. I think I cannot say more at this stage because I would give it all away, but we hope it will be of interest to the Mongolian public. We want it to be public. We don't want it to be, only accessible to few. We think it's important to share this with the public at large. Why Germany and Mongolia have come so far together. We've come a long way, and it's an extraordinarily successful and friendly way. And this is something we would like to share with everyone and hopefully also take it into the countryside, as I said, and be inclusive and not exclusive in locations that hardly anyone can access. We want to be public.
My next question will be related mostly to your profession. And as we know, you are a diplomat with more than 30 years experience. And can you share with us, what are the challenges of working in foreign relations sector or in diplomacy sector that you have faced? And what are the cons and what are the pros?
Of the profession?
Yeah, of the profession, yeah.
Well, one of the challenges that I've witnessed over my 30 plus years career is, but that's normal. I mean, the world is changing. It always is. It would be completely utopian to believe it's not changing, and it will not change. Of course it will change. And adapting to these changes is a never-ending task. You need to readjust policies and concepts and approaches all the time. Now, currently, I mean, when I started, I saw this tremendous change in around 1990 when the Berlin Wall came down, the Iron Curtain came down. Peoples all over the world celebrated freedom and the return to democracy and human rights and all these things. It was a great moment. At this point, we are again in a situation where the world seems to change dramatically, and with a great deal of uncertainty where we are going. What we've seen in the past 2 years is extremely worrisome, and I'm referring to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's a blatant breach of international law. It's a breach of civilizational standards that we thought were over. It was hard to imagine, in even 10 years back, that we would see such a relapse to practices that we were hoping were extinct. They recall the worst in European history. So that is extremely saddening and worrisome. And so again, this is something we all need to factor in and come up with new answers and new models and maybe better international architecture to deal with global matters, because the world needs it. We cannot do without global standards, and we need these global institutions to bring all of mankind together to take on the major challenges that we have today, including climate change, which is affecting everyone. Mongolia has it, everyone has it, in different ways, but we all see the effect some way or other. And we also need to come back to a world order based on the UN Charter that respects international norms, that respects the inviolability of borders, and the entire set of principles that the world has agreed on in 1945 when the UN Charter was first adopted. So, since you were asking how does that feel for a diplomat, it's a constant process of readjustment, relearning, unlearning, new learning, etc. And that's, for me, part of the attraction. On a personal level, since you brought that up, let me just say one thing. Since we're in a country that has such a formidable nomadic tradition, we are often compared with nomads and sometimes called modern nomads or diplomatic nomads or so. My answer would be yes and no. Why no? The yes, because we move a lot. Every few years we move on to a new country. You may have never seen it, never been there. You may not speak the language, you know, it's all new. So, but that's also part of the fun, of course. But I'd say no, we're not nomads, because nomads know exactly where they're going. And they do it again and again. They know the terrain. They have all the information they need. We don't. We don't retrace our steps. We go to places that we've never seen before, that are completely new, and that need a completely different approach of immersion and familiarization. So that's the difference. That's probably the challenge in my profession. Some people would never want to do it. Others would never want to live without it.
Well, thank you for accepting our invitation and taking part in our interview.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and once again, all the best to you and your audiences.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was the new episode of Diplomacy in Mongolia. We'll see you next time with more stories on Mongolia's collaborations, exchanges, and shared interests with its foreign partners.